In any conflict, knowledge is power. Being able to communicate effectively and secretly with allies is always a challenge, and codes, ciphers, and code breakers have played a vital role in every conflict in history. It's unsurprising to know, therefore, that during World War II, some of the greatest minds of a generation were engaged in cracking the codes of enemy communications being transmitted around the world. But it's the lasting legacy of some of this work that is surprising. This is Bletchley Park in the centre of England. Today, it's open to the public and is very popular with visitors. But during the Second World War, this was one of the most secretive places in the country, and the base of the government code and cipher school.
The people who worked here broadly came from virtually everywhere. But more specifically, many of them came from the major universities. They had them on standby, and the idea was that they would come in for courses and that sort of thing. One of the earliest people approached will have been Alan Turing, who was freshly back from the USA, where he just spent 2 years at Princeton University. And the courses would generally be timed for the university vacations, so then they could still do their university work, but train as potential code breakers.
This is the Enigma machine, the most famous wartime cipher machine in history. Using mechanical wheel settings to encrypt messages that were then sent via Morse code, the machine was first developed in Germany at the end of the First World War. At Bletchley Park, mathematicians Alan Turing and Gordon Welchman developed the bomb. This electromechanical device enabled the testing of all the possible settings of the Enigma machine to be done mechanically, in high volumes and quickly. By 1941, there were rooms full of these machines, standing nearly 2 meters tall and 2 meters wide.
And whilst Alan Turing was the man who was an absolute genius in coming up with the technical ideas, it was Gordon Welchman who said we need to mechanize not just that bit, but the whole process overall, and have a complete production line for intelligence. And so Typex was designed. It was a bigger machine. It was a better machine than Enigma. It had 5 rotor wheels. Enigma only had 3. It could produce a paper tape from the side, far easier to use. And so they took these Typex machines and they effectively reverse engineered them, and they made them as clones of Enigma. So having got the settings, the next machine you use now is the Typex machine to effectively type the message out. You put in the gobbledygook, and the tape on the side produces the German.
The deciphered messages were sent between huts at Bletchley for translation and analysis, and then turned into intelligence reports. For security reasons, the huts were only known by their numbers, and no one spoke of the work they were doing inside their hut.
The conditions here were, by modern office standards, rudimentary. I think there was a high degree of camaraderie. Lots of friends were made, but at the same time, overall and overriding was security. So your best friend could work in the next door office to you, but you wouldn't dream of talking to him or her about what they were doing.
Breaking Enigma is one of the most famous achievements of the team at Bletchley. But it was the work done on another cipher machine, the Lorenz, that really laid the groundwork for modern-day computing. Some of the machines that were created to decipher Lorenz have been rebuilt and can be seen working to this day at the National Museum of Computing at Bletchley Park. Enigma machines were used in the field to create secure, everyday communications. But the Lorenz was a much more complex cipher machine, which was used for high-level strategic communications. British intelligence had no idea what the Lorenz machine looked like or how it worked. and knew that the intelligence value of breaking this code would be immense. And some of Bletchley's most brilliant minds were dedicated to the task. Bill Tutt was perhaps the most brilliant of them all. All Tutt needed was a simple mistake to be made by a Lorenz operator.
In August 1941, test messages sent by the Germans setting up a new link between Vienna and Athens were intercepted. It was due to operator error that the message was sent twice. Both copies were received by Bletchley. Because of operator error, the copies were different, and the head of the military section, Colonel Tiltman, over a few days broke the message. Well, breaking one message sent twice is not the answer to the solution. So he then passed it to the research section and said, "This is what I've done so far, now tell me how the machine works." And they kicked it around for a couple of weeks. And then one day, Captain Jerry Morgan calls in Bill Tutt, hands him a sheaf of paper and gives him some really comprehensive instructions. See what you can do with this. And Tutt then took it away and over a period of a few weeks analysed the complete architecture of the machine. Tutt's feat was said to be the single biggest intellectual feat of the Second World War.
With Tutt's plans, and the help of another great mathematician, Max Newman, the Heath-Robinson machine was built to find the settings for the Lorenz machines. The Heath-Robinson was an electronic machine, but required teleprint paper tapes to run simultaneously, one for input and one for output. The paper stretched and snapped, and the process was inefficient. Breaking the Lorenz messages still took weeks. Improvements needed to be made, and Tommy Flowers was the man to help. Flowers was an electronics engineer who worked for the post office. His genius was finding a way to replace the paper tape input with electronic valves. The end result of this innovation was Colossus, the world's first large-scale electronic digital computer. While extremely limited by modern-day standards, this was a monumental breakthrough and reduced the time taken to break Lorenz messages from weeks to hours. The sheer size of Colossus is incredible. By the end of the war, there were 10 Colossus machines at Bletchley, all being operated by female staff. And the intelligence gathered using these machines was absolutely pivotal in the war effort. So why don't more people know about Colossus and about the genius of Max Newman, Bill Tutt and Tommy Flowers? So much of the progress made in the area of computing during the 1940s was simply lost at the end of the war. With the Cold War looming, the British never revealed that Enigma and Lorenz had been broken. People never spoke of their time at Bletchley. Papers and plans were burnt, machines destroyed, and progress stalled for many years. The great minds who had worked together at Bletchley were scattered back to universities in the UK and around the world, and Tommy Flowers returned to the post office. For decades, this groundbreaking work remained secret and unrecognised. It wasn't until 1975 that the first information emerged about the existence of Colossus, and it took another 30 years before the machine could be rebuilt. It's impossible now to imagine how different the history of computing might have been if the veil of secrecy had been lifted in 1945 and these great minds had continued to work together.